first red flag should have been how obsessed Morgan was with keeping every single door locked. Not just the front door. I mean every door inside our apartment. But when you're a 23-year-old with crushing student debt and San Francisco rent to pay, you learn to overlook the little quirks of anyone willing to split the bills. I still remember the day Morgan came to view the apartment. They seemed almost too perfect, quiet, employed in tech, and able to pay 3 months rent up front. The only odd moment came when they spent 5 minutes testing each interior door's lock, but I brushed it off as thorough apartment hunting. Just a safety thing, Morgan had said with a tight smile when I asked about the locked door policy during their first week. You can never be too careful these days. They even offered to pay for new locks on the bathroom and kitchen doors. I agreed, mostly because they offered to cover the cost and I figured it couldn't hurt. But then my stuff started disappearing. Small things at first, a phone charger from the living room, my favorite coffee mug, a few books from the shelf. I started keeping a list after my grandmother's silver necklace vanished from the kitchen counter where I'd left it to clean. Each time I brought it up, Morgan would furrow their brow in exaggerated concern and suggest I must have misplaced the items. The noises started about 2 months in. At first, I thought we had mice, just subtle scratching sounds coming from somewhere above my bedroom at night. But mice don't sound like they're dragging things. And mice definitely don't make the ceiling creak under their weight. Did you hear anything weird last night? I asked Morgan over coffee one morning. They didn't look up from their phone. No, I sleep with earplugs. I started paying more attention after that. Morgan worked from home, but never seemed to actually be working. They spent hours in their room with the door locked. Yet I'd hear them moving around the apartment when I was in my bedroom. Sometimes I'd catch glimpses of them carrying boxes or bags to their room, but they'd quickly shut and lock the door before I could see inside. The breaking point came during a rare week when I had to go into the office every day. Usually, I worked remotely, but this project required in-person meetings. By Wednesday, I was exhausted and came home early, around 2 p.m. instead of my usual 6 p.m. The apartment was silent when I unlocked the front door, but Morgan's shoes were by the entrance. I called out their name, but got no response. As I walked toward my bedroom, I heard that familiar scratching above me, followed by a distinct thud. I froze. The sound was coming from the ceiling access panel in the hallway, the one I'd assumed was sealed shut. Looking up, I noticed the panel was slightly ajar, with a thin strip of darkness visible along one edge. My heart hammered in my chest as I pulled out my phone and opened the camera. Holding it up, I used a flash to illuminate the gap. For a split second, I caught a glimpse of something that made my blood run cold. A pale hand quickly withdrawing into the darkness. I ran out of the apartment, called the police, and waited in my car. When they arrived, they found Morgan in the crawl space above our unit. They'd created an entire living area up there, complete with battery-powered lights and cushions. But that wasn't the worst part. The crawl space extended over several apartments in our building. Morgan had been gradually collecting items from different units, creating a twisted treasure trove of stolen memories. They found my grandmother's necklace among piles of jewelry, electronics, and personal items belonging to at least 6 different tenants. The police photos showed how Morgan had systematically created access points above each apartment, carefully cutting into the ceiling panels during the day when most people were at work. They'd been living a double life, spending hours in the walls and ceiling of our building, watching and waiting for opportunities to steal. What haunts me most isn't the theft or the violation of privacy. It's the photos I found on Morgan's phone after the police returned it to me as evidence. Hundreds of photos taken through the ceiling vents, images of me sleeping, eating, working at my desk. In some, you could just make out Morgan's reflection in my bedroom mirror, standing perfectly still in my doorway at night, watching me sleep through the gap they drilled in the door. The detectives later told me Morgan had done this before. 3 other apartment complexes in different cities, 3 other roommates who'd written off missing items and strange noises. They perfected their system over years, always looking for buildings with accessible crawl spaces, always insisting on locked doors to prevent others from catching them moving between their room and their ceiling lair. I haven't had a roommate since then. I live in a small studio now, on the first floor of a concrete building with solid ceilings and no crawl spaces. I still check my door locks every night, but not for the reasons Morgan did. And sometimes, when I'm lying in bed at night, I catch myself staring at the air vent above my bed, straining to hear any sound that might suggest someone is up there, watching and waiting. The worst part? In their police interview, Morgan said they chose me specifically because I seemed observant. They said they enjoyed the challenge of hiding from someone who noticed things. They called it a game, seeing how long they could live secretly above me before I figured it out. "You should have checked the ceiling sooner," they told the detective, smiling. "Everyone always forgets to look up. Now I can't stop looking up. Every ceiling, every vent, every access panel makes me wonder. How many more Morgans are out there, living in the spaces between apartments, collecting pieces of other people's lives? How many more are playing their twisted game right now, watching and waiting in the darkness above our heads?" I read about how they found Morgan's storage unit after the arrest. It was filled with journals detailing every item they'd ever stolen, complete with notes about the owners' reactions to discovering things missing. They've been doing this for 6 years, moving from city to city, always following the same pattern. Always looking for buildings with crawl spaces. Always insisting on locked doors. These days, I help run a tenant awareness group. We teach people what to look for, the signs I missed or dismissed. We tell them to trust their instincts when something feels off about a potential roommate. Most importantly, we remind them to look up once in a while. Because Morgan was right about one thing. People rarely think about what might be hiding above their heads. The new locks on my apartment doors? They don't just lock from the inside. And the only thing above my ceiling is solid concrete. I made sure of that before I signed the lease. Sometimes I wonder if Morgan is still watching people from other crawl spaces, in another city, in another apartment. But then I remember they're in prison now, and I'm safe. At least, that's what I tell myself when I hear unexpected noises at night. But I still can't shake the feeling that somewhere, in some apartment building, someone is lying awake right now, listening to strange sounds in their ceiling and telling themselves it's probably just mice. Trust me, it's not always mice. Someone's out there again. That's how it always started with Jamie, standing at the window, staring into the darkness, fingers twitching against the curtains. I'd brushed it off as anxiety at first. 3 months later, I was helping them cover our windows with aluminum foil, and I still didn't know if they were paranoid or if we were both in danger. It began the week after Jamie got promoted at the investment firm. They came home one evening, paler than usual, clutching their laptop bag like a shield. I was making dinner in our shared kitchen when they walked straight to the living room window and yanked the curtains shut. "Everything okay?" I asked, following them with a spatula still in hand. "Fine. Just felt like someone was watching me on my walk home." They tried to laugh it off, but their voice had that slight tremor I'd come to recognize as genuine fear. I didn't think much of it until the notes started appearing. The first one Jamie found tucked under their windshield wiper. "I know what you did to get that promotion." Simple, typed, no signature. They showed it to me with shaking hands before ripping it to shreds. "It's probably just office politics," they said, but they checked every window locked twice that night. The notes got worse. They appeared everywhere, slipped under our apartment door, tucked into Jamie's coat pocket at work, even somehow placed on their desk during lunch breaks. Each one more detailed than the last, describing Jamie's daily routines with unsettling accuracy. "You look tired this morning. Coffee didn't help? Maybe try the tea shop on 7th instead of Starbucks. The chamomile might help you sleep better. Blue really isn't your color. The gray suit from Monday suited you better. You should be more careful about what you say on phone calls in the park. Someone might overhear something interesting." Jamie started sleeping on our living room couch, claiming their bedroom felt too exposed. They covered their window with cardboard first, then aluminum foil when they decided the cardboard wasn't enough. I came home one day to find every window in our apartment sealed off from the outside world. "I know it looks crazy," Jamie said before I could speak, "but they can see in at night when our lights are on. I've caught glimpses of them standing in the darkness, watching." I wanted to argue, to tell them they were being paranoid, but then I saw the newest note on our kitchen counter. "Your roommate's bedroom window is still exposed. Would be a shame if something happened to them because of you." That night, I helped Jamie foil my windows too. The police were useless. Without direct threats of violence, There's not much we can do, they said. Document everything and call us if anything escalates. They suggested installing cameras, so we did, covering every approach to our apartment. Jamie stopped sleeping altogether. They'd sit in the dark living room all night, staring at the camera feeds on their laptop. I'd wake up at 3 a.m. to get water and find them in the same position I'd left them in hours before, illuminated only by the blue glow of the screen. "They're out there," Jamie would whisper, not looking away from the footage. Always watching, always waiting. I started taking different routes home from work, checking over my shoulder constantly. The weight of unseen eyes pressed against my skin. Was this how Jamie felt all the time? The morning I found my own note was when everything changed. "Ask your roommate about Marcus Chun." It was taped to my bathroom mirror, somehow placed there while I slept. When I confronted Jamie, they broke down completely. Marcus was up for the same promotion. They sobbed. I found evidence he was embezzling small amounts over years. I turned him in anonymously. He killed himself 3 days later. They found out it wasn't just small amounts. He'd stolen millions to cover gambling debts. His wife left him, took their kids. He had nothing left. And someone knows it was you who reported him? His brother. Jamie's voice was barely audible. He works in IT at the firm. He must have traced the anonymous tip. And now he's... A loud crash from Jamie's bedroom cut them off. We both froze, staring down the darkened hallway. The cameras showed nothing. All feeds normal. Jamie started to stand, but I grabbed their arm. Another crash, followed by the distinct sound of breaking glass. "Call 911, I whispered, shoving my phone into their hands. I crept down the hallway, heart pounding so hard I could barely hear anything else. Jamie's bedroom door was closed. We always kept all doors shut and locked now. But as I got closer, I could see the edge of the door frame had been splintered. A man's voice drifted through the broken door, quietly singing. Jamie, quite contrary. How does your garden grow? With brother's blood and widow's tears, and broken lives all in a row." The police found him sitting on Jamie's bed, surrounded by hundreds of printed photos of Jamie, of me, of our daily routines. Marcus Chin's brother had been watching us for months, documenting everything, waiting for the perfect moment. He'd even installed tiny cameras in our light fixtures. They said we were lucky if Jamie hadn't been sleeping in the living room that night, if we hadn't already been awake, if the cameras hadn't made him sloppy enough to finally make his move. We broke our lease the next day. Jamie transferred to their company's London office. I moved in with my sister until I could find a new place. The aluminum foil came down, but the feeling of being watched never quite went away. Sometimes I still catch myself checking reflective surfaces for hidden cameras, looking for faces in dark windows. I installed blackout curtains in my new apartment. Not because I think anyone's watching, but because I understand now why Jamie needed them. Once you've felt those eyes on you, the darkness outside becomes a mirror, reflecting back all your fears about who might be standing just beyond the glass. Jamie emails occasionally from London. They're doing better now, they say. Therapy helps. They can sleep in their bedroom again, though they still keep the curtains closed at night. They ended their last message with a warning that still makes my skin crawl. The scariest part wasn't the watching, in the end. It was realizing that for every stalker who makes themselves known, there must be dozens who never do. How many people are being watched right now, with no idea? How many watchers are out there, just waiting for the perfect moment to step out of the shadows? I try not to think about that when I'm walking home at night. I try not to flinch when I catch movement in my peripheral vision or when a street lamp flickers unexpectedly. I try to tell myself that what happened to us was rare, unlikely to ever happen again. But sometimes, on particularly dark nights, I find myself sitting in my living room, staring at the window. And even though my curtains are drawn, even though I know it's impossible, I could swear I see a shadow shift against the blackout fabric, a darker shape in the darkness, watching, waiting, collecting every detail of my life for some purpose I may never understand. On those nights, I think about Jamie, and I wonder, were they paranoid? Or were they just the first to notice what was already there? I keep my curtains closed now, too, just in case. The moving boxes said Sarah Mitchell, but my new roommate's name was Alex Chun. That should have been my first clue something wasn't right. But when you're desperate for someone to split the rent in downtown Chicago, you learn to ignore the little things that don't quite add up. I remember helping them carry those boxes up 3 flights of stairs to our apartment. They were oddly protective of one particular cardboard box, the only one that wasn't labeled Sarah Mitchell. When I offered to help with it, they clutched it closer, smiling nervously. "Just some fragile family heirlooms," they said. Alex appeared perfect on paper. Quiet, employed remotely as a software developer, and able to pay 6 months' rent in advance. But in person, something felt slightly off, like watching a movie where the audio is half a second behind the video. They had an explanation for everything, but the explanations became more elaborate with each passing week. The first real red flag appeared when our neighbor Mrs. Rodriguez came over to borrow sugar. She took one look at Alex, and her face went white. "Sarah?" she gasped. "But you." "They said you." Alex cut her off quickly. "I'm not Sarah. I just moved in. I'm Alex." Their smile was too wide, too practiced. Mrs. Rodriguez left without the sugar, shooting worried glances over her shoulder. Later that night, I overheard Alex on the phone in their room. "No, it's fine. Just a nosy neighbor. No, they don't suspect anything. Yes, I have all the documentation. 3 more months at least." I started paying closer attention after that. The inconsistencies piled up like autumn leaves. Alex claimed to be 26, but sometimes mentioned being in high school during events that happened in 2005. They said they grew up in Seattle, but didn't know basic landmarks when I mentioned visiting there. Their work calls always came at odd hours, supposedly because their team was international, but I never heard them actually coding or typing. The mail was the biggest tell. Everything official came addressed to Sarah Mitchell, while anything with the name Alex Chun was always personal correspondence with no return address. When I asked about it, Alex said they were subletting from Sarah, who was traveling abroad indefinitely. My journalism background got the better of me. One night, while Alex was out, I Googled Sarah Mitchell Chicago. The third result made my blood run cold. Local software developer Sarah Mitchell, 28, found dead in Lake Michigan. The article was from 8 months ago. The photo showed a woman with Alex's exact build and features, just with different hair and glasses. The cause of death was undetermined, but foul play wasn't suspected. She had no family in the area, and her body was identified by coworkers. I dug deeper. Sarah Mitchell had been a rising star at a local tech company, with patents pending and a promising career ahead of her. She'd lived in my apartment. She died just 2 months before Alex Chun appeared with her boxes and her mail and her life. The next morning, I called Sarah's old company pretending to be a recruiter. "Oh yes, Sarah Mitchell," the receptionist said cheerfully. "She's one of our senior developers. Would you like me to transfer you to her line?" My hands were shaking as I hung up. Someone was answering Sarah's work phone, using her email, continuing her projects. Someone was cashing her paychecks and paying her bills. Someone had stepped into a dead woman's life like trying on a coat. I started documenting everything. Photos of the mail, recordings of Alex's inconsistent stories, screenshots of Sarah's death notice. I didn't know what I was dealing with, but I knew it was bigger than identity theft. Then my things started disappearing. First my passport, then my birth certificate. My spare credit card vanished from its hiding spot in my desk. Small things I wouldn't need immediately, but would be essential if I wanted to what? Run? Start over? The final straw came when I found a half-completed passport application in our printer's output tray. My photo, but not my name. They were building another identity, piece by piece. Just like they'd done with Sarah. I waited until Alex left for their weekly grocery run before calling the police. They arrived just as Alex was returning, not with groceries, but with a stack of manila envelopes from a sketchy check-cashing place downtown. The detective later told me the truth. Alex Chun didn't exist. Neither did the 5 other identities they found evidence of in that unmarked box I hadn't been allowed to carry upstairs. They still don't know my roommate's real name or how they were connected to Sarah's death, if at all. The investigation is ongoing. They found most of my missing documents in Alex's room, along with equipment for creating fake IDs. There were files on everyone in our building, photos, schedules, copies of mail. They'd been watching, cataloging, preparing. I was probably next in line for identity theft or worse. The eeriest discovery was Sarah's old laptop, hidden in Alex's closet. The browser history showed months of research on Sarah's life before her death. Every social media post, every public record, every detail needed to become her. They'd studied her life like an actor preparing for a role. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They hadn't counted on Mrs. Rodriguez, who'd known Sarah for years. One moment of recognition had unraveled their entire plan. Alex, or whatever their real name is, disappeared during the chaos of the police raid. They found their room empty except for a note on the bed. "Nice meeting you, Rumi. Better luck next time." The police put me in a hotel that night while they processed the apartment for evidence. As I lay there, unable to sleep, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You almost had me. But don't worry, I'll find a new identity soon. Maybe even yours. Sweet dreams." I changed my number, froze my credit, and moved in with my sister the next day. The detective says they're watching for similar cases now, looking for patterns. How many other Sarah Mitchells are out there, they wonder? How many identities stolen from the dead, worn like secondhand clothes by someone who studied their whole lives just to step into their shoes? I still check obituaries sometimes, looking for young professionals who lived alone, who didn't have family nearby. I look for their faces on LinkedIn months after their deaths, for their names on lease agreements and job applications. I look for Alex's face too, though I know they probably don't look the same anymore. The hardest part isn't the fear or the violation of privacy. It's the questions that keep me up at night. Did they choose Sarah at random, or did they know her before? Did they wait for her to die, or did they help her along? And how many other people are out there right now, living borrowed lives, waiting for the perfect moment to shed their stolen skin and become someone new? I don't have roommates anymore. I can't take the risk, because every time I see moving boxes labeled with a different name, every time I catch someone in a small inconsistency about their past, I wonder, who are they really? And more importantly, who were they before? The police never found them. But sometimes when I get mail for Sarah Mitchell or Alex Chen, I know they're still out there. Watching, waiting, learning someone else's life story by heart, ready to become someone new. The notification lit up my phone at 3:17 a.m. Movement detected in master bedroom. My blood ran cold as I stared at the alert because I was lying in that same master bedroom, completely alone, and I hadn't moved in hours. It started when Drew became obsessed with our apartment security. At first, it seemed reasonable. We lived in downtown Seattle, and there had been a string of break-ins in our building. But what began with a simple doorbell camera quickly spiraled into something darker. I got us a deal on a full security package. They announced one morning, hauling in boxes of equipment. Cameras, motion sensors, window alarms, the works. "I'll cover the cost since I know you're tight on money right now." I should have said no. Should have seen how their eyes gleamed with something beyond normal concern for safety. But Drew had been the perfect roommate for 6 months. Quiet, clean, and always paid rent early. Plus, extra security didn't seem like a bad idea. They installed everything themselves, spending an entire weekend drilling holes and running wires. I helped hold the ladder, watched them place cameras in every corner of our common areas. Just the shared spaces they promised. Everyone deserves privacy in their own room. The first month was fine. We got alerts about package deliveries, warnings when windows were left open, notifications about movement in the living room or kitchen. Drew monitored everything obsessively through an app on their phone, but I figured they were just getting their money's worth. Then came the upgrades. I added some enhanced features. Drew mentioned casually over breakfast. The system can now detect specific movement patterns and distinguish between different people. Cool, right? I noticed new cameras had appeared overnight. Smaller, more discreet. They blended into corners I swore were empty the day before. Drew had an explanation ready. The old ones weren't catching all the angles. Better safe than sorry. The notifications changed too. Instead of simple motion alerts, they became oddly specific. Person identified. Roommate. Entered kitchen. 7:45 a.m. Person identified. Roommate. Open refrigerator. 7:46 a.m. Person identified. Roommate preparing coffee, 7:48 a.m. Drew started commenting on my daily patterns. You got home late last night, they'd say, or you've been spending a lot of time on the phone in the living room lately. Always casual, always with that same tight smile. I began feeling watched constantly, even in my bedroom. Especially in my bedroom. Sometimes I'd catch reflections of small red lights in my mirrors, blinking in corners I couldn't quite see. When I mentioned it to Drew, they laughed it off. Probably just your phone charging light. I didn't own a red charging light. The breaking point came gradually like water wearing away stone. I started getting notifications about movement in my room while I was at work. Drew always had an explanation. System glitch, shadow from a passing car, neighbors' vibrations through the walls. But then I got that 3:17 a.m. alert. I lay perfectly still in my bed, phone clutched to my chest, watching the notification window. Another one popped up, movement detected, figure standing, master bedroom. My chest tightened. I was alone in my room, and I was lying down. Slowly, I turned my head toward my doorway. A shadow shifted in the darkness, a familiar silhouette. The cameras caught some unusual activity. Drew's voice came softly through the darkness. I was just checking to make sure you're safe. They stood there for a long moment watching. I pretended to be asleep, fighting the urge to scream. Finally, their footsteps retreated down the hall. The next day, I called in sick to work and started searching my room. I found them everywhere. Tiny cameras hidden in air vents, motion sensors behind outlet covers, microphones tucked into light fixtures. My private space had become a fishbowl, and Drew had been watching every moment. I checked my phone's notification history. Hundreds of alerts going back months. Movement detected. Subject sleeping. 2:14 a.m. Audio detected. Phone conversation about date. 6:30 p.m. Movement detected. Subject changing clothes. 7:15 a.m. My hand shook as I scrolled through Drew's digital log of my private life. How long had they been watching? How many nights had they stood in my doorway, monitoring their security system while I slept? I called the police, but Drew was too smart. By the time officers arrived, the cameras were gone, the app was deleted, and Drew acted completely confused by my paranoid accusations. They even showed the officers the original, legal security system set up in the common areas. I think you're just stressed, they said with concern in front of the police. Maybe we should get you some help. The gaslighting would have worked if I hadn't already downloaded copies of the notification history. If I hadn't taken photos of the hidden cameras before they disappeared. If I hadn't started recording every conversation with Drew once the notifications got weird. The detective found more than we expected on Drew's computer. Similar security setups in 3 previous apartments. Other roommates who had left suddenly, who had complained about feeling watched. Hours of archive footage from bedrooms, bathrooms, private moments. Drew disappeared before they could be arrested. The police found their room empty except for a wall of monitors, each showing different camera feeds from throughout the building. They had been watching everyone, not just me. The official report called it criminal surveillance and stalking. But that sterile language doesn't capture the violation. The creeping horror of realizing someone had turned your whole life into their personal reality show. I moved out that week. My new apartment has no security system, no cameras, no motion sensors. Just deadbolts and chain locks. Simple mechanical security that can't be turned against me. But sometimes my phone buzzes late at night, and my heart stops until I check the notification. Sometimes I catch glimpses of red lights in dark corners. Sometimes I wake up at 3:17 a.m., sure that I'm not alone. The detective says they're still looking for Drew. They found similar cases in other cities. A pattern of roommates installing excessive security systems, watching their victims through cameras disguised as protection. Always moving on before they can be caught. Always finding new people to surveil. I spoke to one of Drew's previous roommates recently. The worst part, she told me, isn't wondering if they're still watching. It's realizing that they probably are, just watching someone else now. Someone who thinks they're safe because their roommate cares so much about security. I think about that a lot. How many other Drews are out there, turning people's homes into private surveillance states? How many people are being watched right now by someone they trust, someone who claims to be protecting them? I disabled all the notifications on my phone. I covered every light, every sensor, every lens in my new apartment. But I can't shake the feeling that somewhere on some screen, Drew is still watching me, still logging my movements, my conversations, my private moments, still standing in dark doorways at 3:17 a.m., making sure I'm safe. The security system is gone, but the feeling of being watched lingers like a shadow. And sometimes, late at night, my phone still lights up with phantom notifications, reminding me that in our camera-filled world, anyone can turn protection into persecution. All they need is access and a reason to watch. When the doctors finally found the arsenic in my blood work, Val had already been systematically poisoning me for 3 months. All because I asked them to clean up their dishes more regularly. Looking back, I should have recognized how that mundane argument over kitchen cleanliness sparked something dark in their eyes. But that's the thing about revenge served cold. It starts so quietly, you don't notice you're being destroyed until you're already halfway gone. The headaches began 2 weeks after our disagreement. Small ones at first, easily blamed on stress at work. Val became the perfect roommate overnight. Always cleaning, always cooking, always asking if I needed anything. They even started making me tea every morning. "You work so hard," they'd say, placing the steaming mug on my desk. "Let me take care of you." I never saw them doctoring the tea. Never caught them sprinkling tasteless powder into my food. Never noticed them carefully noting my symptoms in a hidden journal the police would later find. The dizziness came next. I'd stand up and the world would tilt sideways, forcing me to grab walls for support. My hair started falling out in clumps, and my stomach was constantly churning. Doctors ran test after test, finding nothing obvious. "Probably just stress," they'd say. "Try getting more rest." Val was so supportive during those early weeks. They drove me to medical appointments, cooked special healing meals, even took time off work to help when I could barely get out of bed. The perfect roommate, the perfect friend. "I'm really worried about you," they'd say, watching me pick at the soup they'd made. "You have to eat to keep your strength up." I didn't notice how they watched me eat, didn't see the subtle satisfaction in their eyes as my symptoms worsened. I was too busy trying to understand why my body was betraying me. The neuropathy started in my fingers and toes, tingling, burning sensations that kept me up at night. I lost 20 pounds in 6 weeks. My skin developed a strange grayish tint. Coworkers started whispering about cancer. Moved back home, my mother begged during one of our daily calls. "Let me take care of you." But Val insisted they had everything under control. They'd already taken over all the cooking, cleaning, and shopping. They managed my medications, kept track of my symptoms, and made sure I was eating properly. I didn't have the energy to argue. Could barely stay awake for more than a few hours at a time. The world became a blur of doctors, appointments, and tests, with Val always there, always helping, always watching. The truth came out because of our new neighbor, a retired nurse named Ellen. She saw me struggling up the stairs one day and recognized the symptoms immediately. "Heavy metal poisoning," she said firmly. "I saw cases like this in the ER. You need to get tested right away." I didn't want to believe it. Couldn't process the possibility that someone was deliberately hurting me. But Ellen insisted on driving me to a different hospital, one where Val couldn't follow. The blood test confirmed it. Arsenic levels far above normal. The police found the poison in Val's room, hidden inside a vitamin supplement bottle. They discovered the journal too, documenting every symptom, every dose, every small victory as my health declined. Page after page of calculated destruction. Day 15 started showing first symptoms. Headaches and nausea. Day 37. Hair falling out more noticeably. Had to increase dosage. Day 52. Can barely walk without help now. Almost there. The detective said Val had been researching arsenic poisoning for months before our argument, just waiting for an excuse. They'd chosen a slow, systematic approach, gradually increasing the dose to avoid detection. The goal wasn't to kill me quickly. It was to watch me suffer, to savor every moment of deterioration. When confronted, Val was eerily calm. "You needed to learn consequences," they told the police. "Nobody disrespects me like that." All because I'd asked them to wash their dishes. The recovery was slower than the poisoning. months of chelation therapy to remove the arsenic from my system, physical therapy to rebuild my strength, psychological therapy to rebuild my trust in others. My hair grew back different, coarser, with strands of premature gray. My nervous system may never fully recover. Some days my hands still shake so badly I can't hold a cup without spilling. Val took a plea deal, 7 years for attempted murder. The prosecutor said we were lucky they kept the journal. Lucky they were more interested in documenting my suffering than in succeeding quickly. Lucky my neighbor recognized the symptoms before it was too late. I moved back home for a year while I recovered. Couldn't handle living with strangers anymore. Couldn't trust anyone else's cooking or kindness. The doctors say the physical symptoms will eventually fade, but the psychological scars run deeper. Now I live alone in a small studio apartment. I prepare all my own food, buy sealed drinks only, and never accept anything edible from anyone, not even family. Some call it paranoia. I call it survival. The worst part isn't the lingering health issues or the trust problems. It's knowing how easy it was for them to hide their true nature. How patiently they executed their plan, watching me deteriorate day by day. How many times they could have stopped but chose to continue. I think about Val's journal sometimes. Those clinical descriptions of my suffering, written with almost scientific detachment. I wonder if they're using their prison time to plan their next act of revenge, to refine their methods for the future. The detective told me they found research on other poisons in Val's computer history. Substances harder to detect, chemicals that leave no trace. They've been studying different methods for months, choosing arsenic only because it was easiest to obtain. Some people, he said, spend their whole lives looking for excuses to hurt others. They just need one small trigger to let the darkness out. I keep Val's court records in a folder on my desk. Their mugshot, the evidence photos, the journal excerpts. A reminder that evil doesn't always look like a monster. Sometimes it looks like a helpful roommate making you tea, watching you drink it with a smile that never quite reaches their eyes. The doctors say I'll make a full physical recovery eventually, but I'll never again accept a cup of tea from anyone, never trust a roommate's kindness without question. Because I know now how patience can mask malice, how care can disguise cruelty. And sometimes, late at night when the neuropathy keeps me awake, I wonder about Val sitting in their prison cell. Are they regretting their actions? Planning their next victim? Or are they simply remembering the satisfaction of watching me slowly fade away, all because of a simple request to clean their dishes? Some poisons, I've learned, aren't just chemical. The deadliest ones hide in human hearts, waiting for the smallest excuse to destroy. My ex found me again, Jordan whispered, hands trembling as they held their phone. Look at this text. They know where I live. I peered at the threatening message, feeling my protective instincts kick in. Only later would I realize that text had been sent from Jordan's own laptop, the first move in an elaborate game of manipulation. I'd known Jordan for exactly 17 days when they first mentioned their stalker ex. We'd met through a roommate-finding app. They seemed perfect on paper, employed at a tech startup, quiet, and desperate to move in immediately. Their previous apartment had flooded, they explained, and they needed a safe place fast. The first 2 weeks were completely normal. Jordan was clean, paid their share of utilities early, and kept to themselves mostly. Then came that morning in the kitchen when they showed me the text. I don't feel safe here anymore, they said, voice cracking perfectly. They must have followed me from my old place. I suggested calling the police, but Jordan shook their head violently. They have connections in law enforcement. It'll only make things worse. That's how it started, with a single text and a story that appealed to my deepest instincts to protect. Within days, Jordan had convinced me to install new locks. Within weeks, they persuaded me we needed a full security system. I'll pay for everything, they insisted, pulling out their credit card. I just can't live through this again. The stories grew more elaborate. Their ex had supposedly broken into their previous apartment multiple times, had stalked them at work, had threatened their family. Each tale was crafted with just enough detail to be believable, just enough emotion to trigger sympathy. Look what they did in my car, Jordan said one morning, pointing to a long scratch down their driver's side door. I later found the key they'd used to do it themselves, hidden in their desk drawer. The security upgrades kept coming. Cameras at every entrance, motion sensors on the windows, special locks on interior doors. Each new measure was justified by another incident, another close call, another threatening message. Jordan started seeing shadows everywhere. They'd wake me at 3 a.m., claiming they'd heard someone trying to break in. We'd check the cameras together, finding nothing. They'd sob with relief, thanking me for making them feel safe. "I don't know what I'd do without you," they'd say, eyes wide with calculated vulnerability. I didn't notice how they were isolating me, how each security measure gave them more control over our shared space, how their stories always seemed to require solutions that increased their power over the apartment. The red flags were there, but I was too invested in their narrative to see them. Like how they never had any evidence of their ex beyond text messages. No photos, no social media history, no mutual friends who could verify their relationship. Or how the threatening incidents always happened when no one else was around to witness them. Or how their stories became more dramatic whenever I questioned the need for another security upgrade. My wake-up call came from our landlord. I'd emailed him about installing additional security cameras, mentioning Jordan's stalker situation. His response chilled me. "Jordan who? Your rental application lists you as the only tenant." I sat staring at that email for an hour. Jordan had shown me their signed lease paperwork. I'd watched them pay their share of rent through our building's online portal every month. Except they hadn't. When I checked my bank statements, I found they'd been manipulating the email confirmations. They hadn't paid a cent toward rent or utilities. The lease paperwork they'd shown me was forged. I started digging deeper. Their supposed tech startup didn't exist. The previous apartment they claimed had flooded was never leased to them. Even their full name was fake. Everything, every single detail of their life was fabricated. The final straw came when I discovered their laptop open one night. They'd forgotten to close a document titled Timeline. A detailed plan spanning months. Week 1 to 2. Establish trust, be perfect roommate. Week 3. Introduce stalker narrative, use prepared texts. Week 4 to 6. Escalate security concerns. Week 7 to 8. Begin isolation protocol. Week 9 to 10. Install full monitoring system. Final phase. Complete control of apartment. There were notes about which stories worked best, which security measures were most effective for control, even scripts for emotional manipulation. They'd been playing me like a character in their own private drama. I called the police before confronting them. The detective recognized their method immediately. They'd done this before multiple times. Create a fictional stalker. Use it to manipulate roommates into increasing security and control. Then gradually take over the living space completely. It's about power, the detective explained. They get off on watching people believe their lies, on seeing how far they can push the manipulation. When the officers arrived, Jordan played their role perfectly. Tears, confusion, protests of innocence. But the evidence was overwhelming. The forged documents, the fake companies, the detailed plans on their laptop. "They've been planning to drive me out eventually," the detective said. Once they had complete control of the apartment, they'd use their elaborate security measures to make my life unbearable until I left voluntarily. Then they'd find a new target and start the game again. Jordan disappeared while out on bail. The police found similar cases in 3 other cities. Different names, same pattern. Always the stalker story. Always the security upgrades. Always the slow accumulation of control. I had to move after that. Couldn't stand living surrounded by the cameras and locks they convinced me to install. Couldn't stop seeing how each security measure had been another link in their chain of control. The new place has basic locks and a simple alarm system. Nothing more. Some friends call me paranoid now because I require extensive background checks on potential roommates. Because I verify every detail of their stories, double-check every document. But they didn't watch someone fabricate an entire reality around them. Didn't experience how easily a skilled manipulator can turn your protective instincts against you. Sometimes I wonder about Jordan's other victims. How many people are out there right now, installing cameras and changing locks to protect their roommate from a stalker who doesn't exist? How many are slowly losing control of their own homes to someone who crafted the perfect story to exploit their compassion? The detective said Jordan's detailed planning suggested a deep psychological need for control, a compulsion to create and manipulate narratives. Some people, he explained, are so empty inside that they have to invent entire realities just to feel something. I keep Jordan's timeline document saved on my computer. A reminder that the most dangerous fiction isn't the one that's completely unbelievable. It's the one that's just plausible enough to make you doubt yourself. The cameras are gone now, the extra locks removed. But sometimes I still catch myself checking for manipulation in everyday conversations, wondering which stories around me might be fabricated, which emotions might be calculated for effect. Because I learned the hard way that some people don't just tell lies. They build entire worlds out of them, trapping others in webs of fiction so subtle you don't realize you're caught until it's almost too late. And somewhere out there, Jordan is probably starting their story again, finding a new roommate, crafting a new narrative, setting up the first act of their elaborate performance. I just hope their next target sees through the fiction before the final act.